The carabiner was still clipped when the drone found it. Aluminum alloy, stamped with a serial number the manufacturer hadn't used since 2019, 6 years, and the metal showed almost no corrosion. In 2019, Chen, Brenner, and Sofia Ruiz walked into Redwood Valley State Reserve carrying soil coring equipment, 3 days' worth of freeze-dried meals, and a shared thesis deadline that had already been pushed back twice. Their faculty advisor told the police they were mapping nitrogen runoff patterns in the upper watershed, a project that required them to hike 7 miles in and set up base camp near the old fire lookout. They checked in by satellite phone at 4:30 that first afternoon. Signal was clean, voices calm, and said they'd call again in 48 hours. They didn't. On day 4, a search and rescue team found their tent still standing, stakes driven deep, rainfly taut. Inside 3 sleeping bags laid out, a propane stove with half a canister left, a deck of cards mid-game. Their phones were there too. All 3 lined up on a flat rock outside the tent, batteries dead. But no boots, no packs, no people. The ranger who led the search said the site looked like they'd stepped away to take a photo and just kept walking. For 72 hours, teams combed a 4-mile radius. Nothing. Bloodhounds lost the scent at a creek bed, a quarter-mile south. Helicopters swept the ridgelines. A diver checked the deeper pools downstream. By day 8, the operation scaled back to ground teams and tip-line calls. And by day 14, the reserve was reopened to the public with a missing persons bulletin stapled to every trailhead kiosk. 6 years is long enough for a case to go cold in every measurable way. The families scattered. Maya's parents moved to Oakland. Sofia's brother stopped returning journalists' calls, and Lucas's girlfriend married someone else. The reserve saw 2 more winters of record rainfall, 1 wildfire that burned 40 acres of understory, and a slow bureaucratic effort to update trail markers and replace rotted footbridges. The case stayed open on paper, but the file sat in a drawer, and the drawer stayed closed. Then, in early March of this year, a Forestry Service drone, model DJI M300 RTK, registration number FS44722B, flew a routine transect along the North Canyon wall. The flight plan called for high-resolution thermal imaging to track bark-beetle spread in the upper canopy. At 10:14 a.m., the drone's camera flagged a temperature anomaly, a small metallic signature reflecting sunlight at an angle inconsistent with natural terrain. The operator, a contractor named Eric Poma, ran the waypoint twice to confirm it wasn't a glitch. It wasn't. He filed the coordinates with his supervisor, who forwarded them to the Park Service, who sent 2 rangers up the canyon on foot. It took them 6 hours to reach the spot, a near-vertical scree slope, unstable underfoot, choked with manzanita and fallen timber. They roped in from above. What they found was this: a single carabiner, black diamond positron, quick-draw style, clipped to a 30-foot section of static rope. The rope had frayed where it wrapped around a granite outcrop, the sheath torn open to expose the core, but the knot was still intact. A figure-8 follow-through, the kind you tie if you know what you're doing. And beside it, wedged into a crack in the rock, was a Ziploc freezer bag, the heavy-duty kind, sealed tight. Inside, a write-in-the-rain notebook, 4 3/4 by 7 inches, spiral-bound, pages damp but legible. The rangers didn't open it there. Protocol said evidence gets bagged on site. No handling beyond what's necessary to secure it. They photographed everything in situ, logged GPS coordinates, 37.8461 degrees N, 123.4429 degrees W, and carried it down in a Pelican case. By midnight, the notebook was on a stainless steel table in the county sheriff's evidence room, under fluorescent light, while a forensic document examiner named Dr. Lena Ortiz put on nitrile gloves and started turning pages. There were 42 entries. Most were field notes, soil pH readings, GPS markers, weather observations, the methodical language of graduate research. The handwriting was small, precise, left slanted. The first 30 pages matched known samples of Maya Chen's writing. The lab later confirmed it with software analysis. 94% probability, no red flags. But the last entry didn't. It was dated October 9, 2019, 3 days after the sat phone check-in. The same day search and rescue teams were still scouring the lower trails, and it was written in a different hand. The letters were larger, uneven, some pressed hard enough to tear the paper. It read, "If you're reading this, we tried to climb out the north face. The trail looped. We kept hitting the same fork no matter which way we turned. There's something wrong with the gradient here." That was it. No signature, no explanation of who wrote it, no indication of why the notebook ended up 200 feet above a canyon floor that the search teams had already cleared. Dr. Ortiz ran the handwriting against samples from Lucas and Sofia. No match. She expanded the comparison to everyone on the search and rescue roster. The forestry staff, the volunteer coordinators, still nothing. Here's what made it worse. The carabiner's serial number traced back to a batch sold exclusively through a climbing shop in Berkeley in spring 2019. The shop's record showed one purchase matching that range, a set of 6 quick draws, bought on March 22, paid for with a debit card belonging to Lucas Brenner. The Rangers had inventoried the campsite back in 2019, and their photos showed 5 carabiners hanging from a gear loop on one of the abandoned packs. One was missing. The forensic team tested the rope for DNA. They found traces belonging to Sofia Ruiz on the sheath. Degraded but identifiable. That meant she'd handled it, maybe belayed with it, maybe tied in herself. But the knot, the figure 8 that held the carabiner, that was tied with a pull tension and loop symmetry that didn't match any of the climbing setups the 3 students had practiced with, according to their gym instructor back in San Francisco, who still had their belay certifications on file. 2 weeks after the drone find, the county brought in a search team with ground-penetrating radar. They swept the area within 100 yards of the carabiner. Nothing. No bones, no fabric, no metal larger than a tent stake. The geological survey showed the rock face had shifted during a tremor in 2021. Enough to dislodge loose scree, but not enough to bury anything the size of a human body. The creek below had been dredged twice in 6 years as part of salmon habitat restoration. Still nothing. Then a volunteer researcher named Marissa Tang, who'd been digitizing old trail maps for the park archive, found something no one had thought to check. In 1974, the reserve had installed a narrow service trail along the North Canyon, a maintenance access route for fire crews, barely 3 feet wide, carved into the slope about 20 feet below the ridgeline. It was decommissioned in 1983 after a landslide, and all the maps printed after 1985 left it off entirely. But a hand-drawn survey from 1979, filed in a banker's box at the county clerk's office, showed the trail passing within 15 feet of the exact coordinates where the carabiner was found. Marissa cross-referenced the old trail route with the search and rescue grid from 2019. They hadn't walked it. No one had, because no one knew it existed. She hiked it herself in late April, moving slow, checking every switchback. At the third bend, where the trail curved around a granite face and dropped into shadow for about 30 yards, she found a bootprint in the dirt, preserved under a rock overhang, protected from rain. The tread pattern matched a Salomon X Ultra 3, size 8.5, the same model Sofia had been wearing the day she disappeared. Marissa flagged it, called it in, and waited 4 hours for the forensic team to arrive with casting resin. The print was facing uphill. That matters, because every scenario the original search team had modeled assumed the students went down, toward the creek, toward the valley floor, toward the places people go when they're lost and looking for water. But this print suggested movement in the opposite direction, toward higher ground, toward the ridgeline, toward terrain that gets rougher and harder to navigate, not easier. The forensic geologist, Dr. Aaron Cho, spent 2 days analyzing soil compression and moisture displacement around the print. His report concluded it was made sometime between 72 and 96 hours after the last rainstorm in early October 2019, which put it right in the window when the search teams were still active, when helicopters were overhead, when radios were crackling every 20 minutes with status updates. Why didn't she call out? Dr. Cho also tested a sample of the soil under the print. It contained trace amounts of ammonium nitrate, consistent with the fertilizer used in the upper watershed farms, but not naturally occurring in the reserve. The students' research proposal had specifically flagged agricultural runoff as a contamination vector. They'd come here to measure it. Now it was under Sofia's boot, 2 miles from the nearest farm access road, on a trail that wasn't supposed to exist. Here's the thing no one wanted to say out loud, but everyone was thinking, if Sofia made it to that trail alone, where were Maya and Lucas? If she was trying to climb out, why didn't she follow the trail downhill, back toward the campsite, back toward the search teams who were calling her name? And if she wrote that last entry in the notebook, we tried to climb out the north face, why doesn't the handwriting match? The county reopened the case on May 2nd. They brought in a linguist from UC Davis to analyze the syntax of the final notebook entry, looking for stress markers or code switching that might indicate duress. They found something stranger. The grammar was consistent with someone writing in English as a second language, but all 3 students were native speakers. The word choice was also off. The trail looped instead of we kept looping back. The gradient instead of the slope. Small things, but they added up. A week later, a hiker reported finding a water bottle near mile marker 9, about 2 miles east of the carabiner site, half buried in leaf litter. It was a Nalgene, 32 ounces, covered in stickers from national parks. One of the stickers matched a design sold exclusively at a Yosemite gift shop that Lucas had visited in summer 2018. His sister confirmed it from a photo on his Instagram. The bottle still had water in it. The lab tested it. Neutral pH, no algae, no bacterial growth. It had been sealed tight the whole time. But here's what didn't make sense. The bottle's cap had a built-in filter, the kind you use for questionable water sources. The filter element was unused, still in its original protective wrapper, tucked inside the cap. If Lucas had needed water badly enough to abandon the bottle, why didn't he use the filter? And if he didn't need water, why leave it behind at all? The working theory, the one no one wanted to write down but everyone kept circling back to, was that the 3 students got separated somehow, maybe at night, maybe in fog, maybe during a scramble across loose rock, and tried to regroup by climbing toward a high point where they could see the surrounding terrain. The old service trail would have looked like a way up, a shortcut, a route that might loop back around to the main path if you followed it far enough. But that trail dead ends. It doesn't loop, it just stops where the landslide tore it away. And if you keep going, you're off trail, in the steep stuff, where one wrong step puts you on a scree slope with nothing to grab. That would explain the carabiner. Lucas rigging an anchor so Sofia could climb down, or up, or across. That would explain the rope, the frayed sheath, the knot tied in a hurry. But it doesn't explain the notebook, or the handwriting, or the fact that no one ever heard them yell. In June, a dog walker in a neighborhood 40 miles south found a hiking pole lying in a drainage culvert behind a grocery store. The pole had a registry sticker on the shaft, traced back to a rental shop in Berkeley, that confirmed Maya Chen had checked it out on October 4, 2019, 2 days before the trip. She never returned it. The shop had written it off as a loss. Now it was in a culvert next to a Safeway, the tip caked in rust, the strap still adjustable. No one knows how it got there. The drainage system doesn't connect to any waterway near Redwood Valley. There's no road between the reserve and that neighborhood that the students would have taken. The county's working theory, unofficially off the record, is that someone found it in the reserve years ago, thought it was abandoned gear, and tossed it in their trunk, forgot about it, cleaned out their car one day, and threw it in the nearest dumpster. But the rust pattern on the tip suggested the pole had been submerged in fresh water for at least 2 years, and the culvert had been dry since it was installed in 2017. So where was the pole before it turned up there? The case is still open. The families have started talking to each other again, comparing notes, sharing theories, gathering in a private forum where they trade photos of trail maps and argue over search grids. They've hired a private investigator, a former park ranger named Colin Webb, who knows the reserve better than almost anyone. He's walked the old service trail 6 times now, sometimes alone, sometimes with a crew, always carrying a radio and a GPS unit that logs his position every 30 seconds. He hasn't found anything new, but he keeps going back. Because here's what he can't let go of. The tent was still standing. The sleeping bags were still laid out. The stove still had fuel. If the students left in a panic, if they were running from something or chasing something, or trying to escape, they didn't pack, they just walked away. And if they walked away on purpose, if they planned to come back, then what stopped them? Colin thinks about that a lot. He thinks about the notebook, the handwriting that doesn't match, the water bottle with the unused filter, the bootprint facing uphill. He thinks about the way the search teams moved through the reserve in 2019, methodical, thorough, professional, and how they never once checked the service trail because it wasn't on the map. He thinks about the fact that the drone found the carabiner in March, 6 years after the disappearance, and wonders what else is up there, waiting in the spaces no one thought to look. The Forestry Service has expanded their drone survey grid. They're flying the canyon again in September, slower this time, with a different sensor array. The county has allocated funding for a ground team to follow up on any new finds, and the families have started a foundation to support search and rescue training and equipment grants, because even if they never find Maya and Lucas and Sofia, maybe the next search will go differently for someone else. Meanwhile, the notebook sits in evidence storage, sealed in an archival sleeve, the last entry still visible through the plastic. There's something wrong with the gradient here. Dr. Ortiz, the document examiner, keeps a copy of that page on her desk, and sometimes, late at night, she'll pull it out and read it again, looking for something she missed the first 20 times. She hasn't found it yet. But the case is open now, and the search area has been expanded, and the old maps are being cross-referenced with satellite imagery from every year since 2015. There are people looking at this who weren't looking before, people with new tools and new methods, and a growing sense that the reserve is larger and stranger than anyone gave it credit for. The Forest Service has started flagging unmarked trails and decommissioned routes on their internal maps, and they've trained their field staff to log anything unusual, bootprints, gear fragments, disturbances in the soil that don't match animal activity. It's not closure, not yet, but it's motion, and motion is something the families haven't had in 6 years. And somewhere in Redwood Valley, on a slope too steep for most people to bother with, there's a section of rope still tied to a granite outcrop, fraying a little more each season, holding on.